Yes, would you ask Miss Williams to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Miss Williams, ready to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Good, thank you. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ms. Williams, before the lunch break, I was asking you some questions about the project manager on the Grenfell Tower project, and you told us what your role in that respect was. My next question is, who did you think was the project manager of the project itself?
Yes. Whereas Artelia didn't have that job title in their fees, in many ways I feel they took over the role of project manager because they had two of the critical roles to get the project moving. They had employer's agent and QS, which are both very important. So whereas notion it wasn't in their job title, they actually acted that way, in my perception.
Did you think they ever did anything outside their role as employer's agent or QS?
It's a big question. I suspect they did, but if you're asking me on the spot, I can't think of what they would do, but that they obviously had a good overview of the project.
Did you ever think that they had an overview of the project beyond the scope of the services that they had undertaken, certainly after the 9th of July 2014 contract?
No, I think it was more, perhaps they didn't do anything beyond the scope. It was the way they managed so professionally that they came across as the project manager.
Well, maybe we can take this more shortly. Did you ever think that Studio E was the project manager?
No.
No. Did you understand, in fact, that Studio E had expressly excluded the role of project manager from their contract documents?
I'm not surprised.
You're not surprised, but do you know?
I don't know.
You don't know, but you're not
Don't
surprised. All right. Can we then move back to looking at the question of Artelia? Can we go to the go to ART 402255? These are the minutes of the contractor induction meeting of the 1st of April 2014, and we can see the attendance list there. And Ms. Williams, we can see that you're the third TMO attendee down after Peter Madison and Peter Gibson. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, just generally, because we're going to be looking at quite a lot of these in the course of your evidence, did you generally get these minutes after the meeting, or get draft minutes after the meeting?
Generally, I got the minutes after the meeting.
And was it your practice to read them?
I would read them, yes.
And if you had seen anything that was either wrong or didn't accord with your recollection of what was said at the meeting, can we take it that you would have told Artelia and that they would have made a correction?
I did, and I suspect you'll find several of my amendments in the minutes.
Very well.
They were put at the beginning.
But I'm going to proceed on the basis that unless you tell me otherwise, these minutes are minutes which you saw and approved at the time, or at least didn't object to. Do you see what I'm going with that?
Yes.
Yes. Now, on this, can we then look at this page, and we can see the cast of attendees, and we can see that Philip Booth is listed as project manager, and Peter Blythe as assistant project manager. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, you're listed as the client. And at the bottom of the page, at item 1.1, under introductions, it said that PB confirmed the client on the scheme as TMO. CW, that's Claire Williams, that's you, will be the main point of contact for Ryden throughout the project. And then if we look at item 1.2, ART, represented by PB, will perform the role of employer's agent on the project. Now, as I've shown you, you're the point of contact for Ryden, Artelia is the employer's agent. Does that indicate that you were performing some sort of management role as the TMO's main point of contact with Ryden?
I was the project manager for the client side.
Yes, I see. So your management role is client side, managing the project within it, as I think you told us earlier.
Yes.
And what was your impression of others on the contract, say Ryden and Studio E? What did you think they thought? Who did you think they thought were the project managers?
I can't speak
You
for
don't know.
them. I don't know.
Do you know whether Artelia ever spelt out to Ryden or Studio E who the project manager was, or whether indeed there was one?
I don't remember it ever being discussed.
Right. In his oral evidence for the inquiry, Philip Booth told us how he saw things working, and I just want to show you something that he said in the transcript for day 49, please. And I'd like to go to page 134 on day 49 and look at line 5. And at line 5, Miss Grange asks him, was there a period of time when Artelia did consider itself acting as a project manager? And Mr. Booth said, I don't particularly feel there was, no. I mean, it's not a hard line in the industry, like that you were being an employer's agent or project manager. They're quite close as roles. But in terms of, even if, I was never given any authority limits by the client the client was always at almost every meeting we went to, if you look at all our meetings. So in terms of fulfilling a role as project manager, if I did through, pre-actually signing our appointments, I was never making decisions on behalf of the client because they were very hands-on, they were very experienced, they were very there and involved. Usually when I'm employed as a project manager, it's because a client has perhaps not got the resource to dedicate to a project. So I would be representing them without being present there or making decisions with authority limits, etc. And he goes on. Is it a fair statement to say that the TMO was very hands-on on this project?
Somebody did attend every meeting, yes.
Yes, and it's right to say that decisions were made by the TMO as opposed to Artelia.
Yes, some were informed by Artelia's information, yes.
Right. And then over the page in the transcript, if you go to page 135, the question is asked by Miss Grange at line 5. To your knowledge, was it ever minuted in a meeting that Artelia was not acting as project manager? Answer, no, but I think it was understood by everybody that our appointment was as employer's agent, but because that was what our appointment documents were, and I think TMO were clear that they were the project manager, but we had project management capabilities. Is Mr. Booth correct to say that you were clear as to the scope of Artelia's appointment?
I was, because I was processing their invoices and I'd seen their appointment document. But as Philip said, there's a very thin line sometimes between project management and employer's agent.
Yes. In a project like this, or indeed on this project, would it have been helpful, do you think, to have had a clearly designated project manager with oversight of everything?
No, I've worked on teams of a similar composition and it's not been a problem.
Right. So, seeing if we can put it into boxes, you were the project manager within the TMO team responsible for that on the client side. Artelia were, as their contract said, certainly from July 2014, employer's agent, QS and CDMC,
Yes.
but not a project manager. So was there a project manager?
As I say, I believe that Artelier's appointments meant that they were in a best position to and did steer the project.
Right. Did you, I think what you're telling us, and tell me if this is wrong, is that you understood the scope of their services and understood that they understood the scope of their services, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And that Artelia understood that you understood the scope of their services as well. In other words, neither of you was confused.
I think what Philip has said has shown there may have been some issues, but I think they carried out their employer's agent role to administer the contract as much as I did the client role.
Right. And when people were described as project managers, such as you've seen, Philip Booth in the minute we've just been looking at, where you can see they are described as project manager, what did you understand by that at the time?
I would assume it was as myself. I think if you looked at the minutes, there was 3 of us who were described at one point as project managers. There was Philip, Simon O'Connor and myself. It meant that we managed our part of the project on behalf of our organisation.
Right, I see. So when you see the expression project manager next to Philip Booth's name, are you telling us that you thought that he was responsible for the Grenfell Tower project within Artelia's scope of services as contracted?
He was employer's agent, but his job title was project manager.
Very good. Can I then turn to Artelia's role as designer, and whether there was one? Now, in your statements, you, I think, accept that Artelia performed the services of QS, employer's agent, and CDMC, and you've accepted that today as well. And those were the services set out, I think, in their 2012 fee proposal and also in their 2014 contract, weren't they?
Yes.
Yes. Did you think at any stage that any of those roles involved taking responsibility for the design of the refurbishment?
I had worked with employer's agents who had a role with design, but I know that Artelier didn't.
You know that they didn't have a role with design?
Apart from, I suspect they, because of their CDMC role, they would have initially. Sorry if that's confusing.
Yeah, no, I will explore that, but let's see if I can take this a little bit more quickly than perhaps I was intending to. Did you understand that that the consultant was not to be responsible for the design of the project, namely Artelia?
Apart from, as I say, the CDMC role, which was one of theirs.
Yeah,
but otherwise they weren't involved in the design, as I understand
I see.
it.
So you understood at the time that they had a CDMC role and all that involved, but outside that defined role, they were expressly not responsible for for specifying and or approving the design or the materials. Did you understand that?
I did.
You did. So I don't think we need to take time up on the contracts then. Did you understand the distinction between being a designer and being a CDMC?
Yes, in this contract we had, obviously our designer initially was Studio E.
Right.
And the CDMC's role with design is at sort of starts at inception.
Yes, I see. Just say that we're absolutely clear about this, because it may just be a simple matter of clarification. Can I ask you to go to your 20th of January statement at page 7 and go to paragraph 32? In light of what you've just told me, I just want to see if we can clear this up very quickly. You say there, specifically, as described in detail above, Artelia were already providing services as CDMC, employer's agent, and quantity surveyor. The CDMC role included taking reasonable steps to ensure that the designers complied with their duties, and then you cite from the regulation. Further, in Artelia's form of appointment, they confirmed themselves to be designers. It's on that point I was concerned. When you say that they confirmed themselves to be designers, were you meaning that they confirmed themselves to be CDMC, or did you mean something else?
It was within their CDMC part of the role.
Thank you. Okay. So not designers outside that role?
No.
Right. That I think clarifies that. Now, can we go then to your February 2019 statement at page 9, TMO 00840-364? And again, I think I can take this quite quickly, given the answers you've just given me. In paragraph 48 there, you say that Artelia were initially engaged by RBKC to manage the Calc project. And then you say, in relation to that project, their role was that of contract administrator, cost consultant, QS, and CDM coordinator. And as such, they were required to manage the contract on behalf of the TMO, advise on specifications in terms of CDM, understand the costs involved, and provide regular reporting on programme and costs. And over the page, on page 10, in paragraph 49, you say, as the CDM coordinator, they were required to check the information and comment on any concerns before going to tender. You see that?
Yes.
Now, on that, did you, what did you expect the CDM coordinator, certainly in the context of the Grenfell Tower project, to be checking for?
In general, what the CDM coordinator does is look at the designs to make sure they're suitable to build, and then that what's been built can be maintained. So it's looking at the health and safety, making sure the designers are aware of what they're designing, so they're not building in health and safety risks, or if health and safety risks are there, eliminating them or abating them by making sure the designer is fully aware
Right.
of what the implication is of their design.
Now, you told us earlier that I don't think you had any formal training on the CDM regulations, either 2007 or 2015. How did you come to be familiar with the role of a CDMC?
I have had training on them in terms of the differences and also in terms of presumably what they contained at the time.
Right.
So I have had training on that.
I follow. So far as you were concerned, you thought or understood that Artelia's role was to make sure that the designers in the proper sense were aware of what they were designing so that they weren't building in health and safety risks.
Yes.
How did you think Artelia would go about discharging that obligation as CDMC?
They had, as part of the project team, they had access to all the designers, and the person they appointed put together the pre-construction information for tender, so they would have known what they were looking for, and if there were any queries, I would hope they would have picked them up.
And you were aware, were you, that under Regulation 20.2c, the CDMC had to take all reasonable steps to ensure that designers complied with their duties?
Yes.
Yes. And that included a duty of designers to take reasonable steps to provide design information to the CDMC?
Yes.
And that included, I think you say, detailed design. Is that your understanding?
Sorry, the last bit I didn't quite hear.
Was it your understanding is that among that information they had to provide detailed designs?
They probably wouldn't have been detailed at the stage of going to tender.
Right.
They would have been.
But thereafter they would have been?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
And I think what you're saying is that the CDMC had a duty to ensure that they received from the designers, or take reasonable steps to provide, to receive from the designers design information.
yes, that was available at the time, but I say in this tender it wouldn't have been detailed design.
Right. I'm going to ask you, I think, about the CDA proposal now. Now, do you remember that in the January of 2014, you asked Artelia to put forward a proposal for the CDA role, or a CDA role?
I'm aware that they'd mentioned it, and I said, I'm not aware of it. Can you please send me the details, because I've never heard of this role before.
Well, can we go to ART 408591, please? This is an email from Phil Booth to Simon Cash on the 10th of January 2014. Simon, Claire wishes for us to put forward a proposal for the CDA role. As the custodian of fee proposals and scapes, please can I ask you to do this? I know that they're considering others, e.g. one-man bands, but they have PI concerns. Did you ask Artelia to put forward a proposal to perform the role of a CDA?
I hadn't heard of the role until Artelia mentioned it. I've worked on many D&Bs, and this is the first time I've ever heard of it. I think he'd said, oh, we've got this proposal, and I would have said, I know nothing about it. Please, can you send it to me so I understand what it entails?
Right. Well, let's just come back to that answer in just a moment and see if we can get at this through a document. Can I ask you to go to TMO 008503333? TMO 008503333. And I want to go to page 2 You can see from the top of the email run that it's a set of communications between you and Jenny Jackson in January 2014. And this email is from you to her on the 10th of January.
Yeah.
Jenny, I had a good session with Artelia yesterday and understand a lot more re the appointments. My resume is, and then you talk about Artelia there. She, you say there, one, Artelia TMO procurement, and then you discuss fees. And if you go to page 3 of this document, or this email run, we come to just about halfway down, stage K. Can you see? Stage K covers. Do you see
Yes.
that? And it says, doing working drawings, coordinating the construction detail. I would say specifically here the cladding, window junctions. And then you go on to say, I think this is a massive amount. And this is the 90,000 for stage K. As potentially the working drawings are only for the lower 4 floors, landscaping, sub-consultant, and the specialist cladding and heating contractors will do the detailed drawings. It also means we are duty-bound to pay this, whether or not Studio E are asked to provide the information by the contractor. I cynically think that there is no guarantee that the contractor will use Studio E to their potential, as the architects will push for quality solutions, which the contractor may not find palatable. I spoke to Simon Cash about this, as it is such a substantial amount. Another concern is that if the contractor does not use Studio E properly, this will impact on costs elsewhere, i.e. additional fees on the design advisor who is commenting on the contractor's proposals, and their task will be made harder. I've worked on a scheme where the novated consultant found it frustrating that the contractor ignored all their information and did their own thing and spent many hours bleating to me how the appointment did not work. Any views? You see that?
Yes.
Now, you refer to a conversation with Artelia on the day before this email. Did you ask Philip Booth during that conversation to make a proposal for a CDA?
I reiterate, this probably would have, the different roles would have come up during that meeting, and he would have said, well, we've proposed a CDA, and I hadn't seen the paperwork. So I'd said, send it through, because I don't know what this role entails.
By the time of this email, 10th of January, it looks pretty clear that you understood what a CDA, whether it had that precise title or not, would involve, because as we can see in the last paragraph of that page, it comes up. You see, there's a reference to design advisor.
Yes, I think I'd been briefed by them that there was such a role, and that's why I included it in this email. Right.
So, turning then to the question of the genesis of the request that you clearly did make to Artelia for a proposal, can we take it from this email that you understood that a CDA, having been told perhaps what it was by Artelia, would comment on the contractor's design proposals?
Yes, I having seen the document, yes. Agreed.
And did you understand also that there was a specific risk following the novation of an architect to the main contractor, that the main contractor could just ignore the novated architect or design consultant, if you like?
There is always that worry, yes.
Yes. And that therefore there might be a tension, or was a tension, between the novated architect and the main contractor, because the architect would want quality products or quality results, whereas the main contractor may not be so keen.
As I say, it can happen in contracts, it might not. It's an anecdotal.
Yes. It's an anecdotal
conversation.
You say anecdotal, but in fact, you're doing yourself a disservice, Ms. Williams, because this was part of your experience, which you're telling Jenny Jackson you had. And it looks on the face of it that your experience told you that after novation of the architect, there was a risk in a design and build contract that although the architect wanted quality solutions, the contractor would reject them on the grounds of perhaps cost. Was that a fair summation of the experience you're imparting to Jenny Jackson here?
The experience I had was actually not with an architect, but I think we had a robust design and build contract with specification, that would mean that shouldn't happen. So my anecdote was slightly twisted, perhaps.
Well, what was the risk that you were seeking to avoid or minimise that you thought having a proposal for a CDA might give you?
I think this email covers many appointments. It's not specifically about the CDA. If you'd ask your question again, maybe I could.
Well, perhaps I could do it. Yes, let me ask it more simply. When you asked, well, first of all, is it right that you asked Artelia to put forward a proposal for a CDA?
They had talked about a CDA, and I said, I do not know what that role entails. Please give me something to look at so I can understand what you're implying. What does this role cover? So
when Philip Booth tells Simon Cash in the email we've seen, Claire wishes for us to put forward a proposal for the CDA role, are we to understand your evidence that you didn't actually ask him to propose a CDA role, you just wanted him to explain what one was? Very much so, yes. He put a positive spin on it. And I see, he put a positive spin on it, right. Nonetheless, did you understand at the time when you wanted him to clarify the role that the role was there in order to minimise or eliminate the risk that an architect might well, once novated, give advice to the contractor, but the contractor might ignore it?
I think your question covers several things.
Well, it doesn't, with respect. I'm just putting to you your logic in the last paragraph of the email we've still got up on the page, which I had thought had given rise to what we see.
Yeah.
So you tell me then, in your words, what was it that was going to be good about having a CDA once you understood it precisely what they did?
Yeah, having understood what they did, I couldn't think of anything positive about it because we had a design and build contract where the responsibilities for the design lie clearly with the contractor. This would be an additional tier that perhaps wouldn't bring anything to the table because our design and build contract was based around the fact we did have items that needed specialist design. So I know that so I've never worked with a design advisor, but it did seem that they were going to comment on everything across the board, whereas we had specialist areas of design with contractual arrangements in place to cover those. So the design advisor seemed to be an untenable role.
The design advisor...
Can I just ask, Ms Williams, did it occur to you that whether the contractor or a specialist subcontractor was going to carry out remaining design, a mistake might be made which a client design advisor could alert you to?
The specialist design was such that we felt that the specialists who did the design, they did that day in, day out. A design advisor would be unlikely to find somebody who had specialisation in cladding and M&E, as well as the other elements. It was because of the specialist design that it seemed to be a very difficult shoes to fill.
Right, thank you.
Can we look at the proposal itself? This is at ART 406279. And it's dated February 2014. It was done by Artelia. Proposal for client design advisor. Now, we know that this was sent to Jenny Jackson and copied to you on the 28th of February 2014. Let's just show you that email. I think it's at ART 406225. ART 6, yes. And here is an email from Simon Cash to Jenny Jackson on the 28th of February 2014, and you can see you're copied in on it, yes?
Yes.
And you can see that the attachment there is revised fee proposal combined. and that is in fact this document. Do you remember receiving this document and seeing it? When I say this document, I mean the one that's just disappeared from your screen, the CDA.
Yes, I've seen that.
Right. If we go back to it, ART 406279, it is clear on its first page that it's a proposal for a client design advisor. And you could see, if you scroll down just a few pages, that it was a fairly lengthy document. It ran over some tens of pages. You see that? So when you got it, you would have realised it was a fairly detailed, formal and well-presented proposal, yes?
Yes.
When you got it, did you wonder to yourself, well, I wonder why they're sending me this? All I asked for was an explanation of what a CDA does.
I believe this would probably be on a standard template and they would just tailor it for each scheme.
Well, did you read this document at the time carefully when it came to you?
I read it at the time. Yes.
In doing so, would it have jumped out at you that this was actually a detailed proposal for a carefully defined role with a price at the end?
I know there was a price at the end, but I don't remember all the headings, and I'm only looking at page 1 now.
Yes. Well, we can scroll through it. You've recognised the document. I've shown that you were sent it at the end of February 2014. My question is, when you got this document, were you surprised to get it, given its detail and content?
Well, I think I'd asked Philip for a clarification, so this was clearly what it was the document that they were going to send me through.
This isn't a clarification of what a CDA does. This is a proposal by Artelia to act as CDA, setting out carefully and at some length precisely the scope of that role, with a price at the end.
Yes.
So when you got all this detail, were you surprised?
No, Artelia are a professional company. I would expect them to deliver something of this sort for a proposal.
But yes, and that rather suggests that you'd ask them for one, rather than asking for an explanation about what one was. Do you see the distinction?
I do, but I suspect that, as Philip's email just said, it said you were the holder of all the fee proposals. He'd said to Simon, this is a document that they would have a base for, and obviously they would tailor for each client. So I wasn't surprised to get a professional-looking document and a considered document.
Right. Well, if we go, I see. So you think it was just you say that I don't want to misquote you, that this was a document tailored for each client.
Yes.
And you could see that it was tailored for the Grenfell Tower project when you read it.
To be honest, I don't remember that much about it, but I remember at the time that it had a lot of information in it.
Yes, that was specific to the Grenfell Tower project. Do you remember that?
Yes, I'm sure they would have, but I'm only looking at the front page, so I haven't seen this for a little while.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can look at it. If we go down to page 3, I don't want to rush this document. It's an important document. If we go to page 3, we can see that under introduction, the client advisor lead would be Richmond Harding, and we can see what her experience is. And then if we look at the scope of services in the black box, there are 6 bullet points. Do you see that?
Yes.
And some of them I can well see maybe generic, but item 3, review through a design and compliance report agreed key design packages following the production of detailed drawing stage F, reporting to KCTMO using our risk-based warning light methodology backed up by firm opinions and recommendations. And then if you go to the following page, page 4, you see under project understanding and key data, here are some items that are very specific to the Grenfell Tower project. You see?
Yes.
You've got reference to Studio E being novated. You've got a reference to the scope of works, of which the 3rd bullet point on that page is the overcladding external elevations to improve appearance. And then at the end of that document, if you go to the end of the document at page Forgive me. Page 11, you can see that the fees that are set out there total £30,922 odd and £600 for POE. You remember that?
I remember there was a fee on it. I wouldn't
Right.
have remembered the figure.
Okay. So looking at this document when you got it, and I scampered at it through it at some speed, Miss Williams, it would have been obvious to you that Artelia had taken some time and some trouble to put together a comprehensive client design advisor proposal, hadn't they?
That they had used their standard document, which they tailored for us, yes.
Well, to what extent it was standard and to what extent it wasn't, I can't, I think, get into with you. My question is, given what had come, does it not tell us that you'd actually ask for this document as opposed simply to asking for a brief explanation as to what a CDA does in order to decide whether it would be helpful to ask for one at all?
No, I've had a conversation with Philip. I don't know what this role entails. Let me know what it entails. Obviously, at that point, he would have said, well, let's put a fee on it. I said, OK, I would have said to him, OK, give me the whole lot and we'll see what it looks like. Because I wasn't clear what they were proposing as part of this role, and I didn't know, I had no understanding of what a fee would be. So it would be useful to get the whole package rather than partial. But I also see from this, or I remember from this report, that this person wanted, there was a time frame as to how long they wanted to look through everything. And then you got a report at the end of it. So it was, another process brought into the system rather than the straightforward contractual arrangement we had with our contractor who had the design responsibility. So there are many things about this that still don't resonate as viable.
Now, at this time, do you remember, this is February 2014, the TMO was evaluating the tender bids.
February 14, I think they came back, yes.
Yeah, they came back on the 14th of February.
Yeah.
And this document comes to you on the 28th of February.
Right.
So you're actually in the process of evaluating the tender bids at that very time. Would this service not have been helpful to you in that exercise?
No, the tender which was being evaluated gave performance specifications, and we didn't have any designs to look at that stage.
Right. You know at this stage that the bidders' costs were higher than the TMO's budget, all of them, weren't they?
Yes.
Yes, and you knew that bidders had been asked to price alternative cladding, hadn't they?
Yes.
And you knew, I think, at this stage that it was likely, if not inevitable, that there would have to be a value engineering exercise.
We would have to look at alternatives, yes.
All right, that's another way of putting it. And it was already, I think, envisaged that savings on cladding would be central in that exercise.
If you look at the works cost, which was 8.4 million, the external works was something like 3.5 million. So it was one of the big ticket items that you would look at if you were looking at savings.
Yeah, so I think that's a yes, that you would envisage on value engineering cladding.
It was on the alternative proposals as well, yes.
So that's a yes, okay. Now, I just want to show you what Phil Booth says about this. Again, day 49, please, transcript, page 175, at lines 11 to 15. He says, at line 11, in answer to a question from Miss Grange, but on a project like this that underwent quite a significant value engineering exercise, was that perhaps another reason why a client design advisor would be a good idea? He says, yes, I think that's fair to say. Do you agree that it would have been a good idea for the TMO to have its own design advisor, safeguarding quality, in order to help the TMO, as Ryden was suggesting, in relation to these VE options?
No, the design and build contract with its design responsibilities was very clear. the specialist areas, which were the ones that we were more concerned about, had specialist designers. So, no, I believe that what we had in place was the best option. A client design advisor would have muddied the waters, meant no clear line of communication. And as I say, I don't know how anybody could look at both cladding, M&E and general work and be able to give advice on those. So, no, I'm still clear that a client design advisor, which may be appropriate in other projects, was not because of this contract.
Now, this project involved cladding, didn't it?
It did.
And you'd never done an overcladding exercise,
I
had you?
hadn't.
No. And so why wouldn't the assistance of an experienced architect, as Richmond Harding was, who would have been the CDA, not have assisted you, at least in that?
I didn't read that person's cladding qualifications, but we had our designer, Studio E, who did our basic design, had done cladding on perhaps different types of building, the calc adjacent, for example. And I believe that they were a competent consultant in that I know that they did their research, they looked at different materials, and then obviously the contractor who finally installed was one with a track record. So I again would have worries about a CDA being another tier that would be not best placed to comment on cladding or M&E.
Can we look at ART 402752, please? These are the minutes of progress meeting number 2 on the 19th of August 2014. And we can see that you were there, Miss Williams. Do you see?
Yes.
And if we go to page 2 and look at item 3, you can see there's a heading, Design Development. You see that?
Yes.
Under 3.1, CW to appoint a client design advisor.
Yes.
Now, there's a post-meeting note. We can see that. My question is, was the role of a client design advisor discussed at this meeting?
I believe as Atelier, as employer's agent, lead these meetings and do the minutes. They would have given me the proposal before this, and then they would have minuted CW to appoint a client design advisor. Meanwhile, I'm looking at the client design advisor role with David Gibson. I don't know whether Jenny commented, but we looked at whether that role was needed, and as I say, we decided it wasn't appropriate for the form of contract we had and the building works we were going to do.
Yes. You've gone a bit beyond my question. My question was simply, was the role of a client design advisor discussed at this meeting?
To the extent that it's minuted, possibly.
But it says, you see, CW to appoint a client design advisor, and the action person is CW, that's you. So I'm just asking you, what gave rise, or was there a discussion that gave rise to the action point whereby you were going to appoint a client design advisor?
I believe Atelier put this in as a prompt to keep the subject live. Obviously, we hadn't looked at the CDA, or maybe got it and not discussed it thoroughly. So between the meeting and the minutes being done, the decision had been made.
It says underneath that, post-meeting note, CW advised that the TMO will perform the role of CDA in-house. They will therefore need to sign off all design. Did you agree the wording of that post-meeting note?
No, that was our Atelier's wording, because I had caveated our response to them saying it would only be the CDA, or looking at the design that the TMO would do, would only be for certain areas of the building. So, no, I didn't word that way, and I hope I did an amendment in the following meeting.
Right. Now, Philip Booth was asked about this post-meeting note, and again, I just want to ask you about what he said in his evidence. Transcript, please, for day 49 at page 181, line 17. And he says there, at 181 line 17, question from Ms Grange, so it appears that there was some discussion of this at the meeting, and then a post-meeting note is added afterwards saying the TMO have decided to do it in-house. Can you remember what was discussed at the meeting about this role? Answer, I remember talking to Claire, her asking me, do we need this? What will this role include? What sort of things are they likely to be reviewing? And then if we go over the page, and taking her through that, she went away and had to think about it, and she decided afterwards, that's why we put it as a post-meeting note, that they could do it themselves. And then he goes on at line 6 to say, yeah, that's what I remember. Is that an accurate statement or accurate description of the discussion about this subject that you had with Mr. Booth at that time?
I don't know that it was at that time. That was the gist of the discussion I had with Philip, and that's probably the discussion that meant that I got the proposal from them.
Well, can't be right chronologically, if I've understood your answer, because the proposal came in February, as we've seen, and this discussion is in August.
Yeah, no, I apologise, but clearly I don't know how either Philip or I can remember exactly what was said at that meeting, but you understand that I'd asked for information about it, as Philip had said, and he said that he talked me through it. Then there may have been a gap, because he said she went away to think about it and she decided afterwards. That's why we put in a post-meeting note. So I think the information is there. I just think the chronology is a bit dubious.
Right. Can we look at day 49, page 182? This is also Mr. Booth's evidence to the inquiry. And on that page at line 10, the question is put to him. So you say you remember telling Claire Williams that if the TMO was going to take on the role, it would need to sign off future designs. Is that right? You said that to her, question mark. Line 14, he says, yeah. So again, change is proposed. There's no design responsibility, but they would need to say, yes, we're happy with that to proceed. So a checking role still, but they would need to agree it. I couldn't as employer's agent. Do you agree with that?
That would have been the conversation I had with Philip, yes.
I see. So do you agree, or did you agree, that Philip Booth made it clear that you, or at any rate the TMO, would need to be responsible for checking and signing off the designs that came from Ryden?
Yes.
Yes. Can we then go to ART 2701? This is an email from you to Philip Booth and Peter Blythe on the 29th of August 2014, so not very long after the meeting we've just been looking at. In fact, 5 days after it, actually. And you say there, last Tuesday, we talked about the appointment of a design advisor and the likelihood that this did not particularly apply to cladding and M&E elements which were designed and under guarantee. Upon discussion, most of the design concerns were over the new build areas, i.e. the flats, nursery and boxing club. Now, you've explained this email in your witness statement of the 20th of January 2020. If we can just look at that, page 7, TMO 0085 3697 at page 7. And I would like to look at paragraph 30 with you. You say, Artelia explained to me that the CDA role would not touch on those discrete areas of the project where specialist contractors would have specialist knowledge about their design and the materials used that Artelia would not have. That's what you say. And you say this is Artelia. Who at Artelia explained that to you?
I don't remember. I would suspect it was Philip, but I don't know.
Well, you see, Philip Booth told Ms Grange in his evidence to the inquiry that he never told you that the cladding would be excluded from the CDA's consideration if the CDA was appointed. And that's day 49, page 182, lines 19 to 25. I don't want to go to it, but unless you want to see it. But that's what he said. Can you comment on that?
I can't comment on his testimony, but what my recollection is that when we talked about the role, that the proposal seemed to be comprehensive and it didn't seem to exclude any areas of the project. in our conversation, we did talk about the fact that there were specialist contractors with specialist knowledge, and therefore the CDA role was less interesting, less viable, because it only would cover areas that were social housing. I think that's right. I'm trying to...
Well, do you remember the circumstances of this conversation? And for example, where were you? Do you remember?
No, I'm afraid I don't. But I think the CDA role proposal they gave us didn't exclude anything. But then when we talked about it, they might have said, oh, well, it wouldn't cover that or cover that anyway. So, again, it puts into doubt the value of that role.
Right, so you say that this exclusion from scope of the CDA of cladding came, you say, from Philip Booth in a conversation.
It would be most likely Philip. I don't think I talked to anybody else at Atelier about it.
Right. But as I say, he can't recall that, and he says in his evidence that he didn't say that.
It would have been a conversation 10 years ago.
Now, to be fair to you, he does say, and I'll show you this, this is day 49, page 182, line 23, he says, and this is in the context of excluding the cladding, I think, and again I don't know, I'm not Claire, but I think she was reassured by the fact that obviously there were specialist cladding advisors coming in, and over the page, there were warranties, product warranties and product guarantees that come with the cladding. Yes, and I said, well, yes, that's true, but you will still need to sign it off. And she was reassured by having those extra checks and balances. Now, that was his evidence to the inquiry. Does that help you with your recollection of the conversation about the scope of the CDA and cladding?
I think Philip is saying here that the warranties and the product guarantees that come with the cladding would mean that the responsibility for design, etc., would be clear. But what you will have to sign off was the areas that I said we would take responsibility for, which was the social housing, the boxing club and the nursery, where I did have a communication with Ryden, and the areas that we did sign off were kitchens and radiator layouts and things like that. Right.
Well, that, I think, partly answers perhaps my next question, but let's see how we go. Can I go back to your email of the 29th of August, which is ART 402701? And in the second paragraph, you say, I've spoken to David Gibson, and we are going to see if we can manage this within the TMO, as we are very familiar with the specifications for social housing. Now, I asked Mr. Gibson yesterday about this, perhaps the day before. No, yesterday, about this. And I just want to ask you about it as well. What was the connection between omitting the cladding from the scope of any CDA retainer on the one hand, and the specifications for social housing on the other?
The cladding, I think we've all been very clear, is a specialist item in terms of the products, in terms of the fixing. But the social housing was all contained within the external building envelope, and the specification was already written. So it was purely clarifying which kitchen layout I want, where I want the radiators to go. It was not... It was a totally different scale of issue. I don't know if that's clear enough.
It may not matter. Can I then just put something to you about the decision not to take up the CDA role? You've given us your reasons. Can I just ask you whether the fact that it was going to be an extra £31,000 play in your decision-making?
Not at all. The fees on this project were substantial.
Well, I was going to put
30,000 was
It was a drop in the ocean, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was comparatively minor compared to some of the fees we were paying.
Exactly.
The issue is clearly to do with design responsibility. It was never to do with cost.
And given that the 30-odd or 31-odd thousand pounds was a drop in the ocean compared with the rest of the fees on the project, wouldn't it have been worth spending the money just to have an extra layer of assurance on matters of design?
No, it would have been a complication in the design responsibility in the contract. There were issues. I think I said to you that the person required 10 days to look at something, or there was 10 days, 14 days, I can't remember. And also, they gave you a report at the end of it. They didn't actually, they gave you something else to filter. So it wasn't, in my view, a perfect proposal. But the bottom line was it diluted the contractual responsibility for those specialist areas, whether it be cladding or the M&E.
Can I then turn to a different topic, which is your review exercise? Now, I think you referred to this possibly in your evidence this morning. Can we start by looking at your February 2019 statement at page 34? And I'd like to go to paragraph 189, please. And you say there, I was involved in a review exercise which looked at avoiding any duplication of work, increasing work efficiencies, and identifying other areas where savings may be achieved. And that's all you say about it. Now, first, do you recall the date, or approximately the date, when this exercise occurred?
No, I don't, I'm afraid. No, I don't.
To put it in its context in your statement, the paragraph above it relates to a pre-contract meeting on the 9th of April 2014, and the paragraph below it is about a meeting with the planners on the 8th of May 2014. Does that perhaps tell us that this exercise took place between those dates, or can you not help on that?
No, I can't remember, I'm afraid.
Looking at the substance, do you remember who took part in that review?
I think David Gibson was there, but I can't recall anybody else.
Right. Was it a paper exercise or was it a discussion?
I suspect it was looking at drawings.
Right. Do you remember what drawings you looked at?
I remember that I took out a staircase. There was the plan to knock down a staircase and build a staircase in the same place. So I remember that, but I can't remember anything else specifically, I'm afraid.
Were any decisions made about the duplication of work that you were seeking to avoid?
Oh, I can't remember, I'm afraid. I'm no help to you.
Right. And similarly, I suspect, does the same answer apply in relation to increasing working efficiencies?
It does, yeah, it does.
Was this exercise carried out once or more than once, do you remember?
I don't remember.
Right.
I don't remember.
Can we then move to a completely different topic, which is appointments and fees before Ryden came on board? And I want to start in January 2014, which is during the tender process, but before the bids had come back. Can we start by looking at TMO 00850333, please? This is your email of the 10th of January 2014 to Jenny Jackson. And we looked at this, or parts of it below, earlier on. You say, in the this is page 2, I think we need, actually. You say, Jenny, I had a good session with Artelia yesterday and understand a lot more re the appointments. My resume is. Do you remember we looked at this about half an hour ago? I think you agreed with me that there had been a meeting with Artelia on the 9th of January, which gave rise to you writing this email on the 10th.
Yes.
Yes. And if we look down, scan down, we can see that it deals with the appointments of Artelia on page 1, Max Fordham on page 1, Curtins on page 1, and then over the page to page 2, you can see under item 4, Studio E. You see that?
Yes.
And then you set out below that the fees and the novation position for each. So it looks as if you've done a review of who was on the contract at this stage and the fee position to date,
Yes.
and we're commenting to Jenny Jackson about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, if we go back to her response, Jenny Jackson's response, at the top of this email run at page 1, she says, and this is the 10th, also the 10th of January 2014, Claire, this is very clear and easy to understand. Thank you. Your email focuses on the fees, but not on the authority to appoint. Now, just pausing there, as we, I think, discussed, or you've told us, Jenny Jackson was the TMO's procurement advisor.
Yes.
Yes. Did you understand Jenny Jackson to be asking about whether contractors at this stage had been correctly procured?
No, I was purely checking with her the appointments, and obviously I was looking at the budget. That was my main emphasis on this. So I wasn't talking to her about appointments as such, no.
I see. So you were looking at this purely from the financial perspective.
I was, yeah.
I follow. Let's just see how we go. If you go to your February 2019 statement at page 9, I want to look at paragraph 44 with you. You say there, Studio E were the architects for the scheme providing design advice and specifications, and they liaised with the borough planning. They drew up the architectural specifications for the tower refurbishment and were recommended by RBKC following their work on calc. Now, Studio E's appointment was made well before you started at the TMO, weren't they?
Yes.
How did you know that RBKC had recommended Studio E?
They had, like Atelier, been working on calc, and as part of the follow-up work on Grenfell, they'd clearly been happy with their performance. Otherwise, they would have not suggested that they would be on board for the Grenfell Tower project.
Well, you say in your statement that they've been recommended, and you just said that they essentially had suggested that they would be on board. You say otherwise they wouldn't have suggested that they would be on board for the Grenfell Tower project.
Yes.
My question is, how did you know that RBKC had actually recommended Studio E for the Grenfell Tower project?
I don't, but the fact that they were part of the project team that moved across from the calc meant that RBKC had had no concerns over their performance.
Ah, that may be, Ms. Williams, but I just want to see if I can get to the bottom of this recommendation or suggestion point. Am I to understand your evidence that, in fact, you don't know of any actual recommendation by RBKC? You're assuming that simply that RBKC was happy that Studio E should work on Grenfell Tower.
You are right. The word recommended is perhaps not correct, but there was obviously no problem with their performance.
Do you know, or did you know at the time, what checks or due diligence had been conducted either by RBKC or more specifically by the TMO into Studio E's suitability for the project before they were appointed to the Grenfell Tower project?
I'm aware that Studio E came through an ODU process, which has quite rigorous requirements, but no, I'm not clear on the specifics, no.
Did you ever take any steps to ask what due diligence Studio E had gone through for the purposes of appointment to the Grenfell Tower project?
I did not, but I did talk to them about their experience.
When was that?
Probably when I first met them.
Right.
When I'm saying met them, I'm talking about Bruce Souness.
Yes, but
I would have asked him about what have you done before, what's your background, those sort of questions you do when you're meeting professionals for the first time.
Yes, I understand. But by that time, of course, September 2013, Studio E had already been appointed to the Grenfell Tower project, hadn't they?
Yes.
Yes. Were you aware that they had never done an overcladding project before?
No.
And that Bruce Souness had no experience of overcladding a high-rise residential building?
No, I was aware they'd worked on cladding projects because of the calc, but I didn't know they hadn't done overcladding.
Right.
I suspect it's a fairly rare project.
Did it occur to you to ask them whether they'd ever done any projects involving overcladding a high-rise residential building?
I understood that they generally didn't do residential work.
Can we go back to Jenny Jackson's response to you of the 10th of January, which we were looking at a minute ago? In the third paragraph, she says, the commissions for both Artelia and Studio E are above the EU threshold. And in the fourth paragraph, she says, the fees for Artelia from September 2013 look very low, given the complexity of the project. Do you know what is meant by the EU threshold?
Yes, there are. If you don't appoint somebody through an OJU contract, there is a service fee beyond which you should be appointing them through an OJU contract. It's to make sure that you don't just pay somebody, employ somebody without actually going through the formal procedures. So the OJU thresholds are prescribed. If the fees are above a certain level, it needs to be done correctly through the OJU process.
Did you know at the time what the OJEU threshold was?
I'm wary of saying it, but I would have known at the time, yes.
Why are you wary of saying it?
Because many years have passed and inflation has kicked in the meantime. So I have a figure in my mind, but it's probably not right now.
Right. I think the figure we've been looking at was £174,000. Does that ring a bell?
No, it doesn't. I thought it was higher.
Okay. Were you aware of any arrangement with Studio E or with Artelia to keep their fees artificially below the EU threshold?
No, I think they're commercial companies. They'd want to be paid for what they did.
Did anybody from Artelia or did Jenny Jackson herself point out to you that if Studio E were keeping their fees artificially low, it was a potential breach of the procurement rules?
She would have picked it up, yes. I don't remember whether she said it to me, but
did anybody else mention to you that if Studio E were keeping their fees artificially low, that was potentially a breach of the EU procurement rules?
I don't remember anybody saying it to me, but I was mindful, and I know Jenny was very hot on this, that she would have been aware that there would be an issue if the figures went, too high or too close to the thresholds. So I don't remember anybody keeping their figures artificially low. I think that would be not what commercial companies do.
Did anybody ever tell you that there had been an arrangement, or at least a proposal, that Studio E would defer some of their fees to a later stage?
I don't recall any conversations like that, no.
Right. We can see that Jenny Jackson certainly did think, as I've shown you, that the fees for Artelia for September, or from September 2013, look very low given the complexity of the project. Mm. Did you resolve her question about why they looked so low?
No, I didn't, but it has to be borne in mind that that the project had been instigated probably 2012, and it went to 13, then there was a stop, then it started again. So I just had the figures that I was given, which I believe were Atelier's figures. So I don't know if they had put some figures into a previous spreadsheet for works that they undertook before the stop. I hope that's clear.
Yes, thank you. I'm now going to turn to a different topic, which is the tender process and the decision to appoint Ryden. Now, can I begin with your own experience of tenders? Did you have a working knowledge of the general principles that govern an OJEU procurement process?
I've been on the edge of them. I've never actually been part. I've always been on the sidelines sort of thing.
Right. Did you ever have any training or CPD on the rules governing an OJEU procurement process?
No,
Had you ever managed or worked on such a procurement exercise before?
no.
Did you have I think it would follow that you didn't have a working knowledge of the procurement processes then?
No.
No. Can I then turn to your involvement in the Ryden tender and take you to your February 2019 statement at page 7, please? And I want to look at paragraph 36. You say there, under the heading procurement was dealt with independently by Jenny Jackson, an external consultant, to oversee compliance with OJEU regulations and with all assessments and recommendations being made by Artelia, the contract administrator and cost consultants. Jenny Jackson led the procurement process. And if we go down to the next paragraph, 37, you say, I'm aware that Artelia sent out invitations to 5 tenderers on the 29th of November 2013. I had marked some elements of the tenders, but I had no involvement with the decision-making in relation to procurement. Was your role in the procurement exercise confined to scoring some of the elements? Or was it wider than that?
As you see from the following paragraph, I took some of the tenderers around the tower with Artelier to say this is the building and to walk them around the areas they'd need to be conversant with. I also arranged for some residents to help mark the resident communication section of the tender. So there were three elements, really. One, walking around the block with the tenderers, then getting the residents' involvement for the resident communication part. Then I did mark some part of the tenders, and then I attended the tenderers conference on the 5th of December. So sorry, that was 4 things.
Yes. I think, did you also attend the interviews on the 7th of March 2014?
And I attended the interview, 5 things.
Yeah. And we know that ultimately the TMO decided to appoint Ryden. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know who it was within the TMO who actually made that decision?
I believe that the figures were presented to us by Artelier, and there would have been a conversation, this is the winner, and then it would have gone from there.
Now, looking at paragraph 37, that I've just read to you, where you say, I had no involvement with the decision-making in relation to procurement. I just want to understand what you mean there by decision-making. Does that mean you didn't decide how the tender was structured?
No, I didn't. That was, I suspect, Jenny with Artelier.
And you didn't decide who would mark which questions?
Early on, it had been said that I would be involved with the resident communication section because that would be what I would be taking forward. I don't remember whether I was told what I was going to be marking beforehand.
Right. Did you have any decision-making role in how the tender process would be conducted?
No.
Can I then turn to one of the roles you did occupy, which, as you've just mentioned, was resident involvement?
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Chairman, this is a slightly lengthy, well, not very lengthy, but it's a slightly lengthier topic than will occupy the time between now and a break. So I think we should. It would be convenient if we did.
Yes, of course, we can do that now. We'll have a short break now, Ms. Williams. We'll come back at 3:30, and please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it while you're out of the room.
Okay.
All right? Thank you very much. Right, first three, please. Thank you. Thank you. Would you ask Miss Williams to come back in, please? Thank you. Hi, Miss Williams. Ready to carry on?
I am, yes.
Thank you. Yes, Miss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Williams, can I go back to an exchange that we had earlier this afternoon on the 19th of August 2014 minute? And I just want to take you back to that, if I may. It's at TMO 100-23263, please, at page 2. And you can see there under paragraph 3.1, under the post-meeting note we looked at, where it says CW advised that the TMO will perform the role of the CDA in-house. They will therefore need to sign off all decisions. That's the document we were looking at, and I just want to go to the transcript of this afternoon to look at and see what you said there. It's today's transcript, day at page 124, please. Day 54, page 124, at lines 16 to 20. And I put to you, do you agree, or did you agree, that Philip Booth made it clear to you, or at any rate the TMO, would need to be responsible for checking and signing off the decisions that came from Ryden? And you answered
Right.
yes.
Did I not caveat it that it would only be the boxing club, nursery and flats?
Now, I just want to focus on the question, because I just want to be clear about what you mean when you said yes there, because I then went to a different document. And my question is, when you said yes, did you mean that you would be responsible for signing off that the design was compliant, or did you mean that you would simply, by signing off, approve that the designs shown reflect TMO design choices?
The latter, that the designs were what we'd expect in relation to the specification.
Yes, thank you. Can I then turn to the question of resident involvement in the tender process? And can we look, please, at your February 2019 statement at page 8? And I'd like to go to paragraph 39 in that, please. And you say there, that in the second sentence, residents were invited to take part in the tender review process. Nobody responded to the general request for assistance and participation, and so I personally contacted a number of people to invite them to participate, and ultimately I persuaded 2 leaseholders, namely Pilly Burton, flat 165, now sadly deceased, and Mr. Barakat, flat 92, to provide a view on behalf of residents, and they assisted us when no one else came forward. They were involved with and looked at the part of the tender concerned with the residents' consultation process and the participation with residents. Now, just first of all, to repeat a question I asked Mr. Gibson this morning, are you sure that Pilly Burton was asked to participate in this process? The reason I ask is because her partner, Nicholas Burton, has no recollection that that was the case.
She was there. I specifically remember her sitting there and being part of the...
Right.
the
Can we then go to TMO 1305311? And I'd like to go to page 5 in that, please. This is an exchange between Peter Madison, page 5, yeah, page 5. This is an exchange between Councillor Blakeman, Judith Blakeman, and Peter Madison in relation to the tower. And you can see there, she asks him, do I infer correctly from the New Calc newsletter that there has been a delay in appointing the contractors for the Grenfell Tower refurbishment and that consequently the works will not be starting in March? And this is dated the 20th of February 2014. So that's the topic. And if we go up to the top of page 4, a little bit higher up the stream, we can see Peter Madison's response. He says in the third paragraph there, tenders are currently being evaluated. The current proposed date for interviews is Friday the 7th of March. Are you available on this date? You see that?
yes.
He mentions the interviews. He also says in the previous paragraph that they anticipated a start on site in the spring of 2014, as we have communicated to residents and the board. And if we scroll up to the bottom of page 3, we can see Councillor Blakeman's response, 21st of February. PS, she says, I hope there will be one or more residents on the interviewing panel as well. And then if we scroll up to the bottom of page 2, you can see that this is an email from you to David Gibson on the 21st of February 2014. And you say to him, "Hi, just seen this from Peter. I will look for leaseholder as well as tenant next week. I understand that our contractor interviews are more presentations. Do you know if Peter is aware of this? Claire." Can we take it from that, looking at the timing, that there had been no plan to involve residents in the interview process as part of the tender until Councillor Blakeman brought up the subject on the 20th of February 2014?
I believe that Jenny had been very clear that we should have residents look at the resident consultation section. I think there was an issue finding people, and I know I looked for many people for the 7th of March interviews, and nobody volunteered. So it was always going to be part of the tender evaluation, because, say, Jenny had earmarked that as quite early on.
When did you start looking for leaseholders and tenants to take part in the tender process?
I think we'd been looking for a while, but I was still comparatively new, so I was finding out who people were. So I think I'd asked housing management if they had anybody who they could identify, because it would take people's time. And when I did ask, I'm aware that I'd asked 12 people for the 7th of March interviews. I think those people were referred by housing management to me as being people who possibly may be available, but people declined on the basis of time or doctor's appointments. I think there was a little bit of everything.
The interviews were on the 7th of March, so at this point you only had 2 weeks to find some residents to sit on the assessment panel, didn't you?
Yes.
Can we look at your reaction at the bottom of page 1 and over to page 2? Should show you what David Gibson sends back to you at the bottom of page 1, and then your reaction to it. "Hi Claire, just had word with Peter," and then over the top of page 2, "He will discuss with you next week. Our current thinking is, we assume presentation topic has not been set yet. We assume it will be resident focused. Is it possible for the event to be 2 parts? The formal scored presentation, something slightly less formal, not marked, to enable residents, councillor, I think, to engage with contractors and get some confidence that they can deliver with all the constraints. Perhaps you can work this out with Jenny." Now, this email, it was, if we go back to page 1, at the bottom of page 1, we can see, dated the 21st of February. So this is all happening then. And we can see your reaction to that at the top of page 1 to Jenny Jackson. "Jenny, are you around?" This is now the 24th of February, I should say. "I think we are booked into Artelia for 2 p.m. today. Meanwhile, can I share the below with you? Life is getting more complicated. Maybe we can talk this over this PM." See that?
Yes.
And if we scroll up to Jenny Jackson's response, well, we don't have it on here. But at this point, we are only a few weeks away, or a few days away, really, from the interviews to take place. Why was life getting more complicated, Miss Williams?
I have no idea. If there's more of the email, that might inform me. But the items that were identified in terms of the bullet points. That was for the 7th of March interviews, obviously.
Right. I see. Let's go to the response from Jenny Jackson that I was going to show you. It's TMO 1000, TMO 1000 5313. Jenny Jackson comes back to you and says, "I assume this is a joke?" Question mark. And you respond to her 4 minutes later, morning of the 24th of February. "Jenny, I just picked up your voicemail. I was rolling on the floor, laughing with disbelief too. Peter is not in today, as that was my first job to book him to talk this through. See you at 2 p.m. at Artelia." Can you explain why you thought this was funny?
I don't know what I was laughing at the floor about, I'm afraid. It doesn't particularly mean that it relates to the above email.
Well, let's scroll down then to page 2. We can see that she's responding, Jenny, is responding to your message, to sharing David Gibson's message to you with her. Do you see? And David Gibson's message to you, it was as we've seen at the bottom of page 2 and 3. So what was funny about all of that?
Yeah, nothing was funny in terms of the resident communication. That was something we were always committed to. I suspect Jenny already had a scenario in mind. So I really don't understand what the comment's about. It doesn't particularly mean it relates to this.
Well, what does it relate to?
I don't know, I'm afraid. But I wouldn't make any assumptions because, I say, what was suggested there in terms of the bullet points was fairly reasonable, but I think Jenny had already got something in mind. That would be my automatic view at looking at that.
Well, I'm sorry, just to butt in there. If we go back to the previous document, can we do that, please? No, I'm sorry, the one in which one we were looking at, I think, before that.
That's TMO 1000 5313.
Yeah. In fairness to you, I see that there was a voicemail, which of course we don't have access to.
Yeah, no, so it could have been something totally unrelated. I would never say it was about the resident communication because we were always clear that was what we were going to do. And I say it was when Jenny set out the tender premise, there was always going to be a bit on resident communication, and I was always going to be finding the people who are doing it. I don't automatically connect the two together, and I wouldn't want you to either.
Well, you may not, but I want to see if I can make some sense of this, you see, and Miss Williams, and you understand why it's important that we might have to do that. Let's take it in stages. If you scroll down to page 2, just so we're very clear about the documents we've got. David Gibson writes to you, 21st of February. "Hi, Claire has just had a word with Peter. He will discuss with you next week our current thinking is," and we can see what he sets out there on page 3. Presentation topic not been set yet. Assume that it will be resident focused. Is it possible for the event to be in 2 parts? Formal, something slightly less formal. Now that's what he says. That then goes, as we can see if we go back up to page 2. Do you see that? From you to Jenny Jackson.
Yeah.
And you say, meanwhile, can I share the below with you? Life is getting more complicated. Perhaps we can talk this over. That's all you say.
Yeah.
And then above that, as we can see, she responds to you saying, "I assume this is a joke." Now, just pausing there, what is it that you thought she was referring to by the this?
I don't know whether she was querying the elements of the interview that Peter had laid out, or whether, as I say, she already had something in mind and she was surprised that another proposal was being put forward. I don't know, I can't respond for her.
Well, I'd like you to, because you say in your email response, I was rolling on the floor laughing with disbelief too, which means that you're sharing a joke about something. And what I would like to know is, what was the joke that you were sharing with Jenny Jackson?
I don't know, but it could have been totally unrelated. And I say, I confirm that the TMO was committed to resident consultation. That was never an issue. For me, it was an issue finding people in over the period because I was still new to the project, but there's nothing that I can see that was funny. I think what was suggested was quite reasonable.
Right. When did you ask housing management for residents' names to be put forward for the purposes of the tender?
I'd asked probably fairly early on when I understood that that was required. And
Yes, when was that?
yeah, no, I honestly don't remember.
Do you remember who you asked?
I would have asked Jan Jones, who was the housing manager.
Right. Now, in your witness statement, and it's in various places actually, but certainly the February 19 statement at paragraph 149, you say that the residents at Pilly Burton and Mr. Barakat were involved with and looked at the part of the tender process concerned with the residents' consultation process and participation with residents.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, as we understand it, there were 2 resident representatives invited to score, and you told us who they are. There may be a question mark about Pilly Burton, but you've given us your evidence on that. Is it right that they scored 1 question on the PQQ and 1 question on the ITT?
I believe it would have been on the ITT because the PPQ part of the tender process was complete. I don't remember which questions they scored. There was a PowerPoint in relation to it. Jenny presented them with a PowerPoint because obviously they were lay people and didn't know what they would be looking at. So there was a 10-minute presentation explaining what the purpose of the morning or the afternoon was, what we were looking at, and just briefing them on things they might be looking at. And say Mr. Barakat and Mrs. Burton were both there and participate. I think it's probably only a morning or an afternoon. It wasn't a whole day.
No, that's good. Let's start with the PQQ. And looking at the questions they were asked to score. Can we go to ART 408909, please? And on page 1 of that document, you can see that there's some general administrative information. You can see that with weightings across the page. If you look at the second page, please, at the bottom of the second page, we can see that there is item 10, technical ability. You see that? And the bidder is asked to provide 3 examples of major works.
Yes, I didn't see the PQQ at the time, so this is the first time I've seen this document.
Oh, is that right? You've never
Yes.
seen this document before?
Yeah, because I think the PQQ closed sometime in September, and as a result of that, the number of contractors were filtered out to a smaller number who were then invited to tender, the ITT process.
Right.
So that's why I said that I believed Mrs. Burton and Mr. Barakat were both involved in the invitation to tender, because as a result of that, the tenderer was selected.
I see.
So I haven't seen the PQQ stuff. It was before my time and
Right.
something I wasn't involved with.
It was before your time, but when you came into the tender process, did you not look at the PQQs and how they were scored?
No.
Why is that?
Because it was being managed by Jenny with Artelia. And I say the PQQs is spreading the net to see who's going to be involved with the tender. As a result of the PQQs, there was 5 contractors who were invited to tender. So the PQQ is a filtering mechanism.
Right, I see. Can we then go to the next document, which I think is offline, which is TMO 00847721. Now, just help me with this. Was this the ITT spreadsheet?
This would have been Atelier's overall spreadsheet, yes.
Right. And we can see from your initials that you were involved in this. And by this, do I mean the ITT?
It looks more like the ITT because this includes myself and David and Philip, who would be the next
Right.
set of people.
Okay. Now, if we scroll to rows 16 and 17, we can see question 7.0 at row 16, resident liaison. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then 7.1. And I think I'm right in saying, and we can scroll up and down if you like, that this is the only question where a resident was asked to provide their evaluation. Is that right?
My recollection is it was more because it did take, we were there for an hour or two at least.
Well, this is, I think, a summary sheet of the results of or rather, who was to evaluate what part of the ITT. We can scroll up and down it. Perhaps we should scroll to the top and then scroll slowly down to the bottom so you can see the document in its full form.
So this is Atelier's, and I don't know I would have seen this particularly, but it seems to me this is one part of the document. This relates to just one section. I think there was other sections.
Right. Well, looking at 7.1, resident liaison, we can see from that, rows 16 and 17, that residents, you and Jenny Jackson, JJ, were to score that topic, yes?
Yes.
Were there any other topics from recollection that you thought, or you think, that residents were also asked to score?
I believe that there were definitely different scores for different things. So I don't know whether it was broken down further, but it was about how a contractor would anticipate communicating with residents when they're on site. So it did ask them specific questions. So I don't know whether their 1,500 words was broken into topics.
Right. But looking at the general topics, perhaps we can just go from the top, just to make sure we've got your evidence really clear on this. If we go to the top of the document, we can see the topics. The first one is, I think it's general, and that's about the organisation and supply chains. And then under 2 is logistics. Now, it doesn't look as if that was something that residents were asked to score, and no reason why they should be. Do you accept that?
Yes.
And then 3, programme. Again, it doesn't look like that was something that residents were going to be asked to score, and again, there's no reason why they should be. Correct?
Yes.
And then supply chain, same question. Yes?
Yes.
And then planning, again, same question. You wouldn't expect residents to have any meaningful input into that, would you? No. And then quality. Is that something that you would have expected residents to have input into?
No.
No. Resident liaison, yes, we've seen that. Grant funding, is that something you would have expected residents to have input into?
No.
And then environmental, what about that?
Minimisation, no.
No, that's about minimisation of waste and recycling. And then tender price, which is at the bottom and not, I think, a topic on its own. No. And then interview scoring. So it's identified, I think, 9 topics in all. Are there any other topics from recollection that you can think of where the residents were asked to provide their scores?
I can't remember. I don't remember this documentation, and I don't remember exactly what the residents were asked to...
Right.
Whether, say, that question 7 may have been broken down into more specific detail, because I think if you looked at the paragraph, there was about 5 or 6 points.
Yes. Can we then look at the context of in which this sits, which is Artelia's final tender report? This is at ART 402197, please. And I'd like to have pages 7 and 8 up together on the screen. on page 7, we see as a box on the bottom of that page with the criteria and the weighting, and you can see the tender price gets 34%, price for alternative works gets 6%. You see that?
Yes.
And then there's technical quality with a list of sub-percentages. You see that? Organisation, logistics, programme, supply chain, planning. And then over the page onto page 8, quality, resident liaison, grant funding and environment. And they correspond to, don't they, to the score sheet we've just been looking at on
Yes.
the Excel spreadsheet. And we can see that resident liaison there gets 15%. Do you see that?
Yes.
And if it's right that the only issue that residents were invited to comment on was resident liaison, as we've seen, then they were really limited in the scope of their comments to 15% of the overall percentage.
It's a weighted 15%, yes.
Indeed.
In this part, obviously, we were trying to get residents to attend the formal interviews, and say I did approach 12 residents, of whom nobody was interested or had the time.
Right. I put to you the list of things such as programme and quality, and I think you readily accepted that those were not things which you would have expected the residents to be involved in scoring. I may have put that to you too readily, and you may have accepted it too readily, but maybe not. So can I ask the question, why were residents not invited to score on items such as programme or quality?
The programme would be something that you'd be asking the contractor how would they programme their works. You'd be looking for reasonable lead-in times, you'd be looking for a programme that was viable. We already heard from Atelier in anticipation of a number of weeks. We'd expect maybe them to put the trades in order so you could understand the programme. It would be unlikely that a layperson would understand that.
When you say a layperson, what assumptions were you making about the components of the profile of the residents who occupied this building?
I would make no assumptions about their profile because I know there were many different people with many different skills. But to have an understanding of a building programme is something that perhaps wouldn't have crossed most people's experience.
That was an assumption you made, was it? Or did you actually ask people what
No, we
skills they
didn't
needed
ask
to
people. We made the assumption, but I say I would never underestimate the skills of residents.
No, I'm not suggesting that you would underestimate the skills they did have, but I'm really suggesting to you that they assumed that they didn't have skills relating to programme or quality that could be brought to bear in the tender process.
Possibly, yes.
Yes, I see. Now, we also see, while we're on those two pages, how the scores then break down. And interview, I think, is at the very bottom of that box on page 8 as 5%. So I think technical quality accounts for 55% of the score. Price gets 34% and interviews get 5%. The interviews were the other area in which residents could participate.
Yes.
Yes. So in reality, in total, they get, in terms of weighting, participation in something which is 15% and something which is 5%, so 20% in all. And beyond that, they're not
Weighted.
involved.
Yes.
Yes. Am I right in thinking that in every case, residents' scores were considered along with the TMO scores?
Yes.
Were they averaged together?
That's the way that I believe the scoring is usually done, yes.
Right, I see.
There's a...
So the resident scores didn't stand alone as a 15% score. It was
No.
your views and their views combined.
Yes, I think there's a mechanism for doing this, which Atelier did.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Fine. Yeah, and yes, Philip Booth told us that the process was that the Artelia numbers would then be compared with the TMO/resident numbers, and then the decision would be made as to the final score. Is that right?
Yeah, they do a median or something of that sort. There's a...
Yeah.
calculation.
So I think this process, I think, so far been able to quantify the input that residents had into the tender process. Is that a fair summary of what we've just been discussing?
That they did look at those two areas you've discussed,
Right.
yes.
Then I can turn, I think, to the reports which recommended Ryden. The first is a document which we've been looking at previously in this inquiry, which is ART 402197. And this is Artelia's final tender report of the 12th of March 2014. This is a document that I'm going to assume you saw at the time.
Yes.
And were familiar with, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Can we go to page 25 of that? This is the formal part of it where they express their conclusion and they recommend that approval be given to appointment of Ryden as a contractor. I've summarised it there, but that's right, isn't it?
Yes.
And they explain their reasons for that. The most competitive tender price and the highest quality marking, making it the most economically advantageous tender. Now, do you recall that 2 days before that, on the 10th of March, you produced a report about the tender internally for the TMO?
I did a report, yes. I don't know the timing of it.
Yes, let's go to it. It's TMO 100400921. This is a report I think you produced, looking at its first page, entitled Permission to Let the Grenfell Tower Contract. You see that?
Yes.
This is your report, I think, isn't it?
Yes, I did a report, so...
Well, we can scroll to the bottom. If we just scroll to the bottom of the document, we can see your name there.
Yep. No, so it looks like my format. Yeah.
Claire Williams, 10th of March 2014, just to
Okay.
put it beyond doubt.
Yep.
Right, so, and going back up it, we can go to the second page, page 2, we can see, as we have done, your date, but we go up a little bit, we get your recommendation. You see that? It is recommended that the contract be let to Ryden after the standstill period, which is 10 days from the announcement of the selection, in lines with OJEU regulations, so that any challenges can be addressed. You see that?
Yes.
And this is the date of the 10th of March. Would you say that by that date it was clear to you that Ryden had effectively won?
I think that, yes, Atelier had done some work with the numbers, and I think it was, yeah, obviously.
I mean, you'd had the interviews.
Yes, yeah, because the interviews were the 7th, weren't they?
They were exactly right.
Yes.
They were on the 7th.
Yeah.
And you'd had the ITTs, and they'd been scored. And my question again, would you say that by the time you came to write this report, it was clear to you at least that Ryden had, in effect, won?
Yes.
Yes. Did you discuss this report, or rather your recommendation in it, with anybody at the TMO before you wrote this report?
I would have. There would have been a draft. So, yes.
Who did you discuss it with?
I would have shared a draft with David Gibson, possibly with Peter Madison.
Now, here you see, as I've shown you, that you refer to the standstill period being 10 days from the announcement of selection in line with OJEU regulations. Can we assume that you were familiar, at least to that extent, with the OJEU standstill period?
I believe Jenny would have told me that was the bottom line, yes.
Right. Did you know what its purpose was?
Only that, as it says here, to allow any challenges to be made.
And in the third paragraph, there are some bullet points. And you say, just above those, the main proviso is that after the contract is let, discussions are held promptly with Ryden to deal with, and there are a number of things in those bullet points. And the last bullet point says this: the contract sum should not extend beyond the work's original budget for the scheme allowed of £8.415 million. The budget, as stated on 8th of January 2013, is 9.768 million, comprising fees 8.415k and fees 1.353k. Now, you make it very clear that the and this is your main proviso as I'm showing you, is that the discussions on that bullet point should be had after the contract is let. Was that your understanding at the date you signed this report?
I suspect that was what I would have talked to my manager about it, and I think that would have been the outcome, yes.
You would have talked to your manager, that's David Gibson, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
is it right that you and David Gibson well understood, and indeed were prepared to report, as a main proviso, that there would be no discussions on the subject of budgets exceeding £8.415 million until after the contract was let?
Well, that's what I've written, so yes.
It is.
Yeah.
And I'm really just suggesting to you, very simply, that is what you understood at the time.
Yes. it
Yes.
was.
And what was the source of your understanding that that was to be only after that those discussions could only happen after the contract was let?
I believe I would have been talking to Jenny.
I see. Now, your list doesn't include anything about value engineering. At the time you wrote this report, did you understand that the TMO would be seeking to value engineer the contract down further from Ryden's quoted price of £9.2 odd million?
I was aware that the tender had come in higher than the budget, yes, but I obviously wasn't clear as to how we were going to get there, apart from, as it says here, discuss after the contract is let, which is, I don't know whether that's the only way to do it.
Yes. I mean, do we understand your final bullet point there essentially to be an allusion to value engineering down from 9.2 to 8.14 million?
Well, it says it shouldn't extend beyond the works budget, so yes.
Yes, thank you. Moving a little bit further forward in time, did you go to a meeting at the TMO's offices on the 18th of March 2014 with Ryden?
I don't know. Do we know what the meeting was about? What was the...
We do. Let's look at RYD 403302. And there's a long run up to this, but in the middle of page 1, there's an email from Steve Blake to David Gibson, copied to you,
Yep.
Which follows from earlier emails below it,
Okay.
from David Gibson to Steve Blake earlier that day,
Right.
in which David Gibson sends Steve Blake a simple spreadsheet indicating areas for price reductions to the tune of £800,000.
Okay.
And in the middle email, Steve Blake says to David Gibson by way of response, "Hi David, understand what's required and see no reason why this can't be achieved. Your spreadsheet says a Tuesday PM meet rather than Monday PM as email would work, which would work perfectly. As requested, we will respond early Monday." You see that?
Yeah.
And then the meeting took place, and there are other documents I can show you, I think, but the meeting then took place, as Mr. Gibson told us this morning, in the afternoon of Tuesday, the 18th of March, 2014, with Ryden at the TMO's offices. And he said that you were there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wasn't clear what the subject was, but yes, no, I was
that
there.
Was the
yeah.
that was the subject. Now, Artelia was not at that meeting, were they?
I don't remember. Don't know.
Do you remember anything about the meeting?
I think we looked at a list of possible savings.
Was the list given to you by Ryden?
I think we both had lists.
You both had lists. Were they the same lists or were they separate lists?
Oh, don't remember. I think there were ideas put forward, and I think they were put forward by both parties.
Right. Well, let's first look then at the spreadsheet that David Gibson had sent to Steve Blake, which is attached to his email, which was copied to you on the 13th of March, and that is at RYD 403301, please, from memory. (3301). Was that an email? Was that a document that was on the table, if there was a table, at the meeting of the 18th of March?
It could have been, yes.
Right. Can I show you another document, which is RYD 403490, please? This is a Ryden document which sets out savings under a number of heads, but under the overall title for Grenfell Tower, Value Engineering Options. Now, we know that this document was sent by Ryden, Katie Bachelier, to the TMO on the 20th of March. Was this document on the table at the 18th of March meeting?
I don't remember.
Does it look familiar?
It does look familiar, but I don't know when I saw it.
You would have seen it on the 20th of March or thereafter. My question is really whether it was put on the table in front of the TMO at the 18th of March meeting.
I don't remember, but they may have just talked around it.
I see. Do you remember discussions about savings for cladding that would result by substituting aluminium for zinc?
We'd always looked at the big ticket items to see if there was any options there. And clearly that is one item that's on this list, yes. So it would have been talked about.
And you can see that this document identifies a saving of 293,000 for cladding. Was that discussed at this meeting? Do you remember?
Well, I don't know whether, so my suspicion would be that Ryden would talk around it and perhaps not put a figure. They would say, we'll take it away and look at it. So you said this came out on the 20th, so quite likely they did take it away and think about it.
Right. So you have at least this recollection that there was a meeting at the TMO's offices with Ryden to talk about prices and reduction in their bid.
Yes.
On the 18th of March.
Yes.
And that was before notification of the winner. Yes?
It was, yes.
Yeah, and that was, it would follow, of course, before the letting of the contract, yes?
Yes.
And that was contrary to what you had said in your, as a proviso in your 10th of March report, wasn't it?
Yes.
Why was that? Why was this meeting happening in spite of your clear proviso in your 10th of March report?
I believe the TMO wanted to get resolution of the contract sum as soon as possible.
Did you realise that having a discussion of this nature with Ryden would put the tender process at risk of being compromised?
I was aware that Peter had taken legal advice, but I think that the aim was to see if we could very quickly resolve the contract sum.
That's
So,
not-
as you say, it perhaps was trying to look at the options earlier, perhaps, than after the standstill period, yes.
Do you accept that it was contrary to the proviso you'd set out in your...
It was different from my report.
Well, it's contrary to it. It's not just different. It's
Yes,
contrary.
it was contrary to it,
Yes,
yes.
thank you. We've never seen a written note of this meeting. Now, you were there. Do you remember whether anybody took a written note of this meeting?
I didn't. I suspect it was more looking at headings and talking through any options.
Looking at headings and talking through options isn't of itself a reason not to take a note of a meeting where you're discussing a £800,000 reduction to a £9.2 million budget. Was there a discussion at the meeting about not taking a note of the meeting, Miss Williams?
I don't recall that being mentioned.
Can you explain why there is no written record of this meeting at all?
No, I don't know.
Is it because the meeting was a secret meeting which was improper, as everybody well knew who were present?
I don't think so. I don't think improper is a emotive word.
All right, let me try a different word. Is it the position that there was no written note of this meeting because everybody who was attending knew that it shouldn't be taking place?
I think it was an introductory meeting to look at what we could look at in terms of options, and I don't remember there being... I was probably the most junior in the room, so possibly I should have taken notes, but I wasn't asked to.
Did anybody at the meeting say, let's not take a note of this meeting? It's offline or something?
I don't remember that being mentioned, but as I say, people probably would have looked to me as the most junior in the room, and I wasn't asked to take notes, so I didn't.
Did you have any sort of say as to whether this meeting should take place, contrary to the proviso that you'd put very clearly in your 10th of March report?
No.
Did you express any kind of dismay that the meeting was happening contrary to what you'd put in your report?
No.
Did you feel that you could say that?
I wanted to move the project forward, and I didn't say anything against this idea of having a meeting. Now,
could you please go next to ART 408632? This is the letter to Ryden, dated the 18th of March 2014, in which Ryden are told that they are the preferred bidder. And I'm summarising what's said in the first paragraph there. But looking at it a little bit more closely, the writer of this email, this letter, which is Phil Booth from Artelia, says in the second line, "We have now concluded the tender evaluation process, and we have been authorised by TMO as employer's agent for the above-mentioned project to inform you that you are the preferred bidder, and it is the intention of TMO to enter into contract with you subject to the agreement of the site boundary and formal approval from the TMO board and the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea Council, RBKC." There's no mention in there of the meeting of the 18th of March or any prospective value engineering in this letter, is there?
I'm only seeing the top of the letter, but I suspect not at this stage. At this stage, no, probably not.
You can take it from me that there isn't. This letter was sent out. Well, we'll see. Let's go to ART 408755. This is the email under which this letter was sent by Peter Blythe of Artelia to Peter Arnold at Ryden. And you can see the time, 5:55 p.m. So that was after the 18th of March meeting, wasn't it?
Yes.
So was the decision to send this letter made between the end of the 18th of March meeting at the TMO's offices and 5:55 p.m. that same day?
I don't know.
Who was it at the TMO who told Artelia to send this message, send this letter?
I don't know. It wasn't myself.
It wasn't you. You don't know who it was?
No.
If it wasn't you, it can only have been either Peter Madison or David Gibson, surely.
Yes, it would have been one of those two, but it wasn't myself.
Right. Was Ryden's, or rather, was Artelia's notification to Ryden held back until they had agreed, or at least indicated, that they could reduce their price by the £800,000 that the TMO had indicated?
I don't know. I wasn't involved with the sending out of the notice, so I don't know.
Right. Can we go to your February 2019 statement, please, at page 32? And I'd like to go to paragraph 181. At paragraph 181, you say this: on the 17th of March 2014, and then you refer to a document, Artelia formally advised Ryden that their tender proposal had been accepted. Their tender proposals were for £9.2 million, which was above the funding available, but was thought to be achievable with some refinement aimed at saving approximately £500,000. I'm aware that it was identified at that stage that there could be a saving of almost £250,000 in respect of the cladding. Now, note the date, 17th of March. If we go to the exhibit that you're referring to, that, which you refer to as CW27, that is at TMO 1005474. Let's look at what it is you refer to there. Now, this is a letter which bears the 17th of March date, and the title, and it's to Ryden, and the title is Notice of Award of a Contract subject to agreement over site boundary issues, enhancement and improvements to Grenfell Tower, etc. Now, that is not the final version that was sent to Ryden I showed you a moment ago, was it? Yeah. Because that version had 18th of March on it and a different title.
Yes, that's a different version, yeah.
It's a different version. So this is an earlier version, isn't it?
Yes.
So what you're referring to in your statement as the 17th of March letter is in fact not the right document. That wasn't the document under which Ryden were notified that they were the winner, was it?
Agreed.
Right. And at this stage, well, perhaps we should just look at some metadata on it. If we go to ART 402210, we can see here that this document I'm showing you on the screen now gets amended by somebody called Jenny. And we can see that these amendments are made. And if we go to page 8 of this document, we, I think, can see a bit more detail about the timing and the identity of the person who made the amendments. Because here are the, I call them metadata, but it's a list of the changes. And you can see that Jenny makes the changes, and you can see that they are all made in the early evening of the 17th of March. Can you see?
Yes.
And Jenny, I'm going to assume, unless you tell me differently, is Jenny Jackson.
I assume so, yeah.
Right. Was there any other Jenny involved in this process? No. So it looks as if the document you refer to not only wasn't the one that was sent out, but was then amended by Jenny late in the day on the 17th of March. Now, at that stage, of course, the 18th of March meeting was scheduled but hadn't yet happened, had it? Mm. Right. Is there a reason why this letter didn't go out on the 17th of March?
I can only assume what everybody looking at it would assume, that they'd written it on the 17th and Jenny picked up errors that meant it didn't go till, it wasn't revised and didn't get posted out till the 18th.
Well, is the reason why this letter didn't go on the 17th of March, or perhaps early in the morning of the 18th of March, when she'd made her amendments, was because you were waiting to see what happened at the 18th of March meeting with Ryden?
I don't know. I don't know whether it took Artelia a while to do the amendments. I don't know. I wasn't involved with this part of the tender.
You see, had the notifications been sent to the bidders on the 17th of March, that Ryden were the winner and the others were the losers, then a meeting on the 18th of March with Ryden would have occurred at least post-notification and not pre-notification, wouldn't it?
Yes.
When you did your witness statement and said that the winners were formally informed on the 17th of March, why did you do that?
My assumption was that I probably had the draft letter in my directories, in my folders, but I possibly didn't have the amended 18th of March one. So I'd assumed the 17th of March one, which clearly seeing this now as a draft, had been sent out.
When was the first time that you discovered that, in fact, the notification of preferred bidder status was sent to Ryden on the 18th of March and not the 17th of March, as you said in your statement?
Probably only recently, in the last month, maybe, something like that.
Right. Is there any reason why you didn't see fit to make a correction by way of a supplemental statement?
No, it obviously wasn't brought to my attention, so I would have if I'd spotted it, but to say, to me it looks though I'd saved the original letter in my directory and didn't have the updated one.
Right. And could one of the reasons be, and tell me if this is wrong, that you knew very well that the letter to Ryden did not go until the evening of the 18th of March, after the all-important meeting with Ryden, and that you said 17th of March in order to make it look as if it had gone before?
I wish I had the acumen to think like that. No, it was a pure admin error on my part because I got the wrong bit of paper in my folders.
Now, you were fully aware of all the conversations going on within Ryden between the 11th and the 18th of March about value engineering, weren't you?
I was at that meeting that you've described, the 18th. I don't know what else you mean by...
Well, you were
other
privy to
things
the
going on.
emails.
Oh, yeah, I was copied in the emails, agreed.
You were copied in on the emails, and so you
Yeah.
could tell, at least from the emails that we've seen, that you were aware that within the TMO there were discussions between the TMO and Ryden about value engineering to the tune of £800,000.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Why haven't you mentioned anything about that in your statement or statements?
I don't know. I suspect the emphasis of my statements was more about the construction of the tower rather than some of the background. I don't know. It would have been something I would have been advised on, and it possibly wasn't highlighted.
Is one of the reasons why there is nothing at all in your witness statements about these discussions with Ryden prior to the notification of preferred bidder status is because you knew they were improper?
No, I deny that. That's not true. It was something that wasn't picked up. I was concentrating and was obviously guided as to what I put in my statement. My emphasis was more on the construction of the tower, that the tender process wasn't something that I was majorly involved with and didn't cross my mind.
Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you very much. Well, Ms. Williams, I think we've reached the point where we ought to stop for the day. I am going to have to ask you to come back and answer some more questions tomorrow, but I think you were expecting that anyway.
I was.
We'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow, please. And in the meantime,
Tomorrow.
please don't...
Monday.
I'm sorry, Monday. Yes, I'm forgetting myself, aren't I? We'll resume at 10 o'clock on Monday. And in the meantime, because there are several days between now and then, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything related to it.
I won't.
All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You go to the usher then, please. Right, Mr. Millett. Thank you very much. 10
Monday.
o'clock on Monday.
Monday. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you very much.